if you want to sell your business, this is what you need to hear. So getting an offer at a high price does not mean your business is going to sell there at all. My biggest weakness as a CEO is changing too much. When you're building a marketplace, you want to focus on the hardest side or the most valuable side. And so early on, I made the decision that the startup founder is the most valuable side because that brings the deal flow.
Andrew, it's great to have you here, man.
Yeah, great to be here, man.
We met on the internet because we're both posted on Twitter talking about our businesses. And I started looking into you and your background. And from what I can tell, you've been a serial entrepreneur as long as I can look back. You've built a couple of pretty cool businesses. One of them called Business Apps you sold. And now you're the CEO of Acquire, which is a marketplace for SaaS businesses. Does that sound right?
Yeah, there's a lot of failure in between that and some other smaller startups. But yeah, man, I was that kid selling baseball cards. I had like a eBay hustle when I was young. I used to make websites for all the bands at my high school. That was kind of fun. I'd also do photography because they'd let me into the shows if I took pictures.
Genius.
And I just fell in love with business early. I think is probably the short story. I just love the hustle, the game. I don't know like how to perfectly describe that. But so what I did when I went into college was I actually had a goal. I went into college saying there's no fucking way I'm getting a job. I have 4 years to figure out how to build a business.
That's a badass
so
statement.
Every summer I would start. I just knew it. I was because I didn't really grow up with too much. And so candidly, I just did the math. I'm like, 100K a year for like 50 years. Like, I don't know if that's going to reach my goal. So I felt like, I could, like, I at least wanted to swing for something bigger, and building a business was always a dream of mine. And so every business was kind of a stepping stone. But yeah, so, kind of to round out that last statement, I'll let you ask your next question, but started a company or business or idea, whatever, side project every year in college. And then I'd enter the entrepreneurial program or the business plan competition. I'm the only person to win fourth, third, second, first. And I won first with Business Apps, which was a drag and drop mobile app builder. And then ironically, I graduated with the lowest GPA on record. It's a 2.07. So if there's a 2.06 guy or below or gal, they have the record. But I'm actually doing the keynote speak in 2 weeks at Chico State. So it's kind of funny how things can work.
Yeah, you really turned it around. They weren't like, none of the teachers were going to bet on you out the gate, but you've got to be the most famous.
You'd be surprised. No, at Chico State, they were really supportive. I think they saw potential in me early because what I would do is like 1 year I got third place in the business plan competition. And then I literally second place went to, I remember this. It was a girl who had an idea to put chips in babies so you don't lose them. And
like
I wrote
not like
a
toy
huge
babies, like
email to
into your baby.
Humans. And my idea was something, I think it was like to help college students find places to rent, something like that. And I just was like, the regulatory issues, like the capital requirements, like, is this even ethical? Like, how are you going to give this? And then that was kind of a moment that I remember where the teachers were like, hey, we should like help this kid. And so there's a number of different, so shout out to Peter Strauss, Ryan Johnson. There's a number that I'm forgetting, but they kind of took me under their wing, and I just hang out in the entrepreneurship center all the time. So instead of class, I was always in there, just kind of working on stuff, getting ideas, getting feedback. They were super helpful, and I kind of owe everything to them.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually one of my upcoming questions here. I'm curious to know, there's so many adults that have influenced our lives. Who's somebody in your life that you look back and you think, maybe without this person, you wouldn't be where you are today?
Without a doubt, Christian Friedland. He is so at Business Apps, we raised 100,000 from 2 local angel investors in Chico. And Chico is a small town. It's known as a party school, if I'm being candid. Also a big reason why I went, if I'm being more candid. And he would give these talks and I'd always attend. And I just thought he was the coolest guy in terms of, he had built a company called build.com. It does about 5 billion in GMV. He had sold it for 50 million. And he was still active CEO. He was basically the second biggest employer in Chico, aside from Sierra Nevada, the brewing company. And his personality is kind of like Ari Gold. So he kind of swears a lot, but he's like a genius, but also very humble and just an awesome human being. And he doesn't make a lot of angel investments. And so he was the type of investor where I felt like he put my outcome over his. Like he's already rich, he was just trying to direct me correctly to some sort of successful outcome. Never pressured me to raise venture capital. He's actually like, no, like what you have right now, like, you can sell this business and be set. So don't rush into things like that. So he was definitely like my business mentor. And we did this interesting thing where he connected his Gmail into this app that shows who you email. And there's this huge bubble right at the top. And there's like a small bubble below, then like a third bubble, and then a bunch of scatters. Those are all the people we email. And I was the big giant bubble. And
Wow.
then the little bubble was his COO. And then his third bubble was his wife. So me and him just got along really well. I texted him the other day. He shaved his head. I was like, hey, you look like Conor McGregor. I like it. And then he used to make fun of me and say I look like Ty Lopez when I had glasses. So just great guy, great mentor, and just really shaped my life. And he was kind of the one that I would say made the more serious bet. So without him, I owe him everything.
You find this guy, Chris. He is an incredible entrepreneur, it sounds like. He's teaching at the school. He really cares about the students. And somehow your paths cross and he becomes a lifelong mentor to you. And I guess, what do you recommend to young entrepreneurs today? How do they find that mentor? How do they get someone like Chris in their life? Because it sounds like this person really shaped your outcome.
Yeah, good question. I have a good answer for that. So I think a lot of people go out and look for mentors as step one. And I think this applies to kind of, just a lot of business advice in general is make a pitch deck first, when actually you should go look for customers, go look for a mentor and then figure out what to do. That can work. But I think what a better approach is what I did was I started building a company. I started getting customers. I started showing traction on my own. And so he became interested in what I was doing because he thought it was interesting. The iPhone had just came out, mobile apps and businesses was kind of a mystery. How do you make them? What product specs, features should they have? And I figured all that out. And so my point being is, I think the best way to find a mentor that really aligns with what you're doing is just take action. And then from there, naturally, you'll have people that kind of come to you inbound. And so the way I met Christian was just an introduction to one of the teachers I mentioned previously, Peter Strauss. He just said, hey, Christian wants to meet you. And I was like, holy crap. Okay, cool. And we, kind of just went from there. But he had heard about what I was doing. And I get this a lot too, where people ask if I can like mentor or give advice, and I'm always open to. But the people that I feel like I've had the most impact on in terms of just, and in no way am I like a good mentor or an official mentor, if there is a title like that. But it's people that I'm interested in what they're doing and I feel like I can help. And if you're at a stage of just, I'm trying to figure out my life and I want to build something, I can't really help you there. But if you have something and you're just trying to go from, 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 or, 1 to 10, whatever it may be, that's fascinating. If I could help, I think that's where the best mentors step in is, they see that action and they know they're not going to waste their time. And then you just got to have, good chemistry as well in terms of, do you actually like spending time with this person?
Yeah, that's a really interesting answer. I think people are like a single dot, and when they reach out to a mentor, that mentor has that one dot to interact with. But then if they're creating momentum or they're doing something interesting, they're creating more dots along the way. And then they have like a bigger surface area for that mentor to engage with. So maybe you didn't engage with the first or second dot, but that third dot where they're fundraising or they're out there trying to get their first customer, it gives you kind of more fodder to interact with. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what you're saying.
Tell us a little bit about Acquire. What's going well there?
Acquire from a high level, it's a startup acquisition marketplace. What's going well? Startups are being acquired. Yeah, we got our goal. We're a startup acquisition marketplace, and startups get acquired. In all seriousness, things I'm really excited about is number one, the team. We just opened an office in La Jolla on the same street Business Apps was. Same
Mm.
exact street in La Jolla. And the reason for that is the majority of my team is down there. And it's just a beautiful area. Office space is super cheap. And so my whole sales and customer success team is down there. So we're kind of putting together a sales pit, if you will. And then we have this, what we've been doing is we've been gathering a lot of data on buyers, specifically, what are you looking for? What size businesses, industry, tech stack, you name it. And right now, discovery on acquire.com is you browse the marketplace, but we don't have any instant alerts. And so we needed to get the data. And then in a couple weeks, we have this like incredible, buyer alerts feature where you can get instant alerts, you can get a daily summary, a weekly summary based on your specific criteria. And that's taken quite a bit to come to fruition. So excited for that. And yeah, just keep moving forward in terms of the team's probably the best I've ever worked with. The culture's great. I love working there. I got to work there too. So things are going good.
When you describe your customer base, why do you say startups as opposed to just technology companies or software companies? Is there a reason in particular the focus is on startups?
Yeah, good question. I would say, the vernacular that we use is on purpose and intentional because it resonates more with, startup founders. So when you're building a marketplace, you want to focus on the hardest side or the most valuable side. And so early on, I made the decision that the startup founder is the most valuable side because that brings the deal flow. And then when you have the best deal flow, buyers naturally will come for that deal flow. And then also as a startup founder, like I don't call acquire.com like an online tech business. And then so that's why we use terms like acquired, not sold, or, instead of I'm selling my company, it's I'm looking to get acquired. Those little pieces of terminology I just thought were interesting, but there's no like grandmaster like science plan at why we started doing it. Just maybe a little tidbit. When I first launched Acquire, which was previously MicroAcquire, it was just me doing everything. I did all customer support, all product management, all the vetting and curating of the listing, doing due diligence on them, writing the newsletter. It was during COVID, so I had a lot of free time, like most people. But I think just that sort of me being an entrepreneur, I guess, and you know, starting other businesses, I thought that terminology just made sense for the industry.
Why do you feel, like something that I've been thinking about is why do you feel this problem hasn't been solved yet? Like technology companies have been around for 20 years. There's a variety of marketplaces out there. eBay's been around for like 15 plus years. Why hasn't anybody solved the startups marketplace online yet? Well,
It's a hard problem. And as you know, acquisitions are really complex and they're not, cookie cutter. When you're selling a business, you're not really just selling, assets. Technically, you are, but there's a lot of emotion involved and there's a lot of different opinions involved and there's a lot of different people involved. And so, the problem, just M&A in general, specifically for, I'll use your terminology, technology companies, is $1 trillion market. But there's, ranges to that. There's obviously $1 billion acquisitions, $100 million acquisitions included in that. But in terms of, the way that we look at the problem is we're focused on the sub $10 million market because that is what I believe to be the most underserved market. Because typically your main option is a status quo, which would be a business broker. And there's a lot of great business brokers. But there's never really been any innovation to come to the market. There's never really been any standardization or tools built to make the acquisition process more efficient. And so when I saw that, that's one of the reasons I started acquire.com. And I think also just there's such a lack of education around how startups get acquired. So when you combine a fragmented industry, limited options, and available options are fairly expensive. Not a lot of innovation being applied to the market or the problem. It kind of opened my eyes to like this could be something really interesting and that could possibly apply to not just startups or online businesses or potentially, all types of businesses, including like Main Street businesses, which is where we want to get to eventually. But I'm a big fan of having a beachhead as, your landing pad. But yeah, long story short, it's a very hard problem. I've seen a lot of acquisitions, seen a lot of, celebrations and a lot of heartbreaks. Like it's very, very difficult. In terms of, again, getting a buyer and seller to agree on a price, making sure that, due diligence is going correctly, making sure that, people are honest in terms of, how they're stating financials. There's just so many moving parts and at any point the deal can fall through. And so, we try to do our best to, give specifically, business owners just more confidence in the process. And then we also provide advisory from our team to kind of assist and help if they have any questions along the way. But yeah, it's a very, very hard problem to solve and bring together, but we're trying.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it looks like there was a little bit of controversy that blew up on Twitter last week. I know you and I had an exchange about this. Somebody that I follow posted that Acquire is either fixing or artificially creating prices for your companies. And, one, I'm curious, how do you think about pricing companies? Because I've been on the buyer side and I think it's tricky. And I think sellers sometimes have unreasonable expectations, which, ruins their chances of getting a good sale. But what happened last week and kind of what do you think where was the frustration coming from and how do you kind of think about this problem?
Yeah, that was fun. So for context, I was at a buddy's house playing poker when someone sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." But from it, there's a lot of great feedback in terms of, I think as a company, we could do better making how we value startups more transparent and just easier to understand. Because I think what a lot of founders do is they'll hear about, a different business that's maybe similar to theirs and it sells for 10 or 20x or 50, like some ridiculous prices. But those are outliers. Those are strategic acquisitions, which do happen, but are very rare. And a lot of the buyers on acquire.com are financial buyers. So you're going to be valued on your revenue and your profitability, also your growth rate, just basically, what have you executed today? And when we're talking about sub $10 million companies, I think that's another big data point. So there's nuance in terms of how we price companies or how we leverage our data to price these companies. But when every, acquisition you see is, because you only really hear about the really big acquisitions. And when you kind of just see just like Adobe bought Figma for, I think it was 25 times forward in recurring revenue. Salesforce bought Slack, I think at like 16. You start to kind of think, okay, this is kind of where companies of mine trade for. But when you're subscale, let's talk specifically, 2 million in recurring revenue, maybe you're doing 500,000 profit, you're not going to get those outlier multiples. You're going to be getting more realistic multiples within, generally valued on profitability and not, forward revenue. So I think, the feedback was warranted and appreciated, but it's not possible for us to determine the market price for technology companies. Maybe someday if we get so big that, we have a true monopoly over the whole market, but unfortunately, I don't think we ever will. But yeah, I just think there's always going to be, like before, it's always someone. It's, the buyers complaining. We had a deal go out this weekend and it was priced at, I think like 3.5 revenue, but it was only showing 200,000 profit. And some buyers chimed in like, who would buy this? And then on the other end, we have founders that are like, this is way too cheap. So our job as a company is to really, bridge the gap and educate both sellers and buyers on kind of what we're seeing startups sell for and more transparently provide that data. But yeah, tons of great feedback. I totally saw both sides in terms of like there's a little confusion going on. So we immediately responded with data that we have on hand, just showing like this is really how we see startups selling for in the market, to just, you know, actions speak louder than words. And hey, let's kind of share a little bit more, because it became really apparent with my team, like, oh, there's a really big education gap. And so as a company, that's one of our goals to get better at. We're already talking about some cool stuff like a real time valuation dashboard, because we have that internally. We've just never made something externally.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's an interesting problem, and I definitely recognize it because I went from startups for 10 years to private equity, which is basically the class that we're in, right? We're in private equity, we're a long term holding company. But for all of my businesses up until now, I always assumed VC valuations or tech valuations. And when I had a business that was doing like 1 million of revenue, in my head, I was thinking, oh, I have a business that's worth like 15 or $20 million. You know, we're growing fast, things are good. And that's just not the reality of a buyer situation, right? Like you said, most big acquisitions we see are strategics. And actually, that's just a really small part of the pool. Most acquisitions are actually made by like private equity, or they're made by like a cash flow multiple buyer. And that's really where we sit now. And you're kind of in between, right? You're saying like, I want to sell, we are selling startups currently. So startups think they have this big old valuation, but they're really being bought by private equity, and acquire sits in between those two. So your goal is to kind of connect those two dots, which is not easy because, you know, for me as a founder, I can totally recognize the frustration of having $1 million business that somebody all of a sudden tells me it's worth 3 million as opposed to 15 million. You know, I'm like, what? I thought it was hot shit. What is this?
Yeah, no, and that's where, I also empathize, because I was there too. I remember my even, Christian Friedland, talking about my mentor, he'd tell me standard market multiples is 10x revenue. So I was like, oh, 10x revenue, sick. Like,
Yeah.
we're worth a lot right now. But unfortunately, we didn't receive a 10x offer. Um, so I think, there's just there's so many different circumstances where, a high multiple makes sense. Definitely with the, strategic buyer, which we have seen. We have seen some higher multiples, but when you get to the averages, there's far more financial buyers than there are strategic buyers, because there's individuals like you who own a business specifically in the business of buying other businesses. And so the way that you're going to price the business is way different than a strategic that's really hard to sell to, that doesn't necessarily have you on the radar. You may be subscale as well, because typically, a strategic will step in at around 5 million in recurring revenue. So there's some sort of scale in place. So again, even I've been in the shoes of, this is my baby and this is worth like so much. Like, but as a company, it's our job to really maximize exits. And I think a big part of that just is education, and I think it just kind of falls into the bucket of, hey, like this may not be what you want to hear, but if you want to sell your business, this is what you need to hear. So it's kind of, this price up here, it's not real. It's it's your imaginary net worth. Like, this is what you can get today based on our data and based on what we're seeing from other buyers. And so just kind of closing that gap, even if it can be sort of a shock, and we see it all the time too. So it's definitely probably one of the hardest challenges in running a two-sided marketplace, where you want buyers to have realistic prices, and if you don't, they'll leave because they'll just think, the gap is too big. And then with startups as well, understanding that when they do sell at, a certain multiple, it's a fair multiple, and they feel like they got acquired at, a fair acquisition price. So it's tricky. I've been there.
I guess you're a serial entrepreneur. So I'm sure you're always thinking about different ideas that you could be doing, even whilst you're running your business. When you see the businesses selling on your platform, are there certain business types that you think to yourself, hey, like people should start more of these businesses because they're selling really well? Or there's a general hunger amongst buyers for these type, or maybe there's a general hunger amongst buyers for these types of companies. What are some ideas that are kind of swirling around as you're seeing what's being sold on Acquire?
It's hard not to. I even so my biggest weakness as a CEO is changing strategy too much. And so I don't bring up ideas with my exec team. I just keep them in, just push those ideas down. But all the time I'm like, man, why don't we just become a private equity shop? Because we have first look, and we know what deals get the best offers. So we can, get down to specific science of like this deal has a XYZ probability of selling based on the buyers, the category, um, financials, health, all that sort of stuff. But my favorite companies are the boring ones. Like we sold a CRM that helped pet groomers recently. We sold an invoice company that helped freelancers recently. So basically, just XYZ product for XYZ niche. And if I was going to do anything, I would probably, I've actually thought of this. I'd roll up like a business starter pack, starting with, start your business, like, business formation, logo maker, website builder, all the way down to invoice generator, like the full sort of like GoDaddy start your business stack. Because we see products along that range, and those businesses always like this one specific business, invoice generator for freelancers. It got 188 NDAs. It was like our record for us. And this was over a period of 3 weeks. It had 6 different LOIs on it. It's already under offer, but as soon as that one was going live, I was like, oh, get ready. This one and the revenue mark, million in revenue, 600K in profit, something like that. And those businesses, are great opportunities for people looking to enter entrepreneurship through acquisition. And so we see a lot of that as well. So I really like boring businesses and commoditized markets with some sort of, niche angle that, kind of gives them a little bit of differentiation.
Got it. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. The acquire.com private equity arms coming soon. LPs, please sign up or don't. This is coming off of the
No, we
Gazdecki
we've
balance sheet.
thought we have thought about it, but I think the next move we'll be making is in Main Street businesses.
Hmm.
That was kind of the original sort of vision with the business was if we can make this work for technology companies, the next messier marketplace is Main Street. There's geographic constraints. There's just financial data collection constraints. Like getting a P&L from a SMB is no easy feat. There's much more emotion attached, given the owner's usually retiring. So I've been looking into that a lot more. I just think there would be some conflict of interest if we were just kind of cherry picking the best deals out of the marketplace, and so
I could
we'll
see
we'll
that.
we'll never do that.
I could definitely see that. We've bought some businesses off of a website called Biz Buy Sell. I think they've been around for a long time. It's like 99%, what we call Main Street businesses that are like a bar or like a restaurant. And we don't buy those. But every once in a while, there'll be like a little gem, like an HVAC company, or we bought a equipment rental business in Hawaii. Um, but it does feel like a bit of a different animal than a software business, for example.
Oh yeah, the hurdles to making it work would be really, really, really difficult. Um, so we're like the first step that we're doing is collecting data on Main Street businesses that are looking to sell, and then starting to build relationships with SMB brokers so they can list on our platform just like they do with Biz by Sell. But we have a product suite that can help them take the deal all the way to the finish line, or with third party advisory guidance, whether that's in-house counsel or a third party escrow service. So that's we're kind of like testing it. But yeah, it's a drastically different, it's a different customer profile, it's a different way of valuing the business, it's almost like an entirely different business, even though they're all businesses at its core.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun
Yeah.
to give it a swing. So we'll see.
I'm curious, aside from price and structure, like every seller wants cash up front. Um, so aside from the highest price and the best structure, what are sellers looking for, if anything? Like, do they care who their company goes to? Do they care kind of what happens after they sell their company? Or are you finding that kind of the highest price wins at this point?
Depends on the entrepreneur for sure. I mean, some definitely will go for the highest price, but typically, in my experience, the highest price, isn't what you want to be optimizing for. You want to be optimizing for the highest price at which you believe the letter of intent or the formal offer will close. Because we see all the time people just shoot real high and then, it's too good to be true. And if it's too good to be true, it almost always is. So I actually recommend, if you have a firm like yours, as an example, makes an offer, but it's 20% below maybe the highest offer, but the other offer is coming from an individual with no acquisition experience. They don't have finance, like you don't know where the financing is coming from. Take, the offer with the firm that's got a reputable background, has references. You know what it's going to be like going through due diligence. They're going to take, good care of your business. So to answer your question, we actually recommend to optimize for that because that leads to the highest likelihood of a close rather than just the highest offer, because those can fall through at any moment. Even an offer from a reputable firm can fall through, but understanding that getting an offer at a high price does not mean your business is going to sell there at all. Like, you still need to be selling your business. You still need to be ensuring that you're responding to due diligence items correctly. But again, just working with an experienced buyer, I think, can really be worth the risk in terms of a price swing. But that's just my personal opinion.
Got it. So find a buyer that you like, but more importantly, one that you think is going to close. So if somebody's out there with not a lot of acquisition experience and an unclear funding source, think twice before you take the highest offer. Is that right?
Yeah, like I'll give you a real example recently that I really like. There was a business that we helped sell, and it was I think it was for 4, 5, 6, 5 million or something like that. And they had five different strong offers. One was way above everything, and I was actually uh, lightly brokering this deal, and so I was giving advice to the owner of the business, then also, speaking with the interested buyers as well. And we narrowed it down to two different offers. And they weren't the highest, but they were tied in terms of price. And it was a husband and wife owned business in let's just call it the lead generation space. And the people that we ended up, I just recommended they go with this party, was also a husband and wife. The husband was in private equity, the wife had a background in marketing, and you could just see on the call this goodwill. And when you go through due diligence, you got to understand, like, it's not just here's the keys, late. It's like you're going to be working with this person. There's going to be post transition work, and so at the very minimum, if you can't get along with the person, they're late to calls, they miss calls. That's a very big indicator in terms of what due diligence and how serious are they about the acquisition. If you ask questions like, can you send along your due diligence schedule so we can get an idea of what we're going to go into after we sign the LOI? Like, there's a lot of pre-vetting questions that you can ask, in my opinion, just so you ensure that, again, your goal is to sell the business at the highest price. But the highest price doesn't necessarily mean it comes from the highest LOI. The highest price is the correct LOI with the person that you get along with, because that increases the chances of close. So there's a really good quote. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of this. I know you're a Warren Buffett fan, but you can't do a good deal with a bad person. So I think it's really important that I always recommend, even as far as this, I don't know if you would agree with this, but when you're selling your business, I think the first call should just be, who are you? And like, just barely talk about the business, like get to know each other. Because if you don't have that piece right there, it's hard to really see a deal go through if there's any sort of tension, or, there's not just sort of a good sort of vibe between the two individuals. But that's just my personal take.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You're really not selling a hard asset, right? This isn't like a home or an apartment building where you can just hand over the keys and say, hey, you got this, go ahead. You're selling a business, a legacy, there's employees, there's systems, there's processes, there's culture, and you really want to buy it or sell it to somebody who's going to understand those things and kind of make the most of that transition, because you don't want to have buyers or sellers remorse, for something that you've spent so much time pouring your soul into to build.
Yeah, completely agree. Especially if you have, like an earnout or if you have seller financing or stuff like that. Again, like that's where the goodwill comes in, and going through a due diligence process where you're meeting weekly. The buyer knows exactly what they're getting. There's no stone, left unturned. Those are the best acquisitions where at the end, both parties are happy and they're also happy to engage or honor any sort of post-closing engagements, like whether it's documenting code or being an advisor to the business or staying and working at the business. That's again where goodwill can make all the difference.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And you've done some pretty interesting things on the marketing side. Some strategies that I haven't really seen most founders do. You're building in public, you're posting on Twitter, you're posting on LinkedIn, you've published a book. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think about marketing and growing this business? Because you've grown so fast, and I think a lot of people can learn from it.
Yeah. So when I first launched, was MicroAcquire at the time. I gotta can't forget where you came from, but I actually wrote down my go to market strategy, and it was going to be brand storytelling, and really kind of creating a movement around people selling their companies and kind of bringing a light that building a software company, selling it for one, two, three, five, $10 million is pretty fucking cool. Like again, you hear about the big outcomes, the $1 billion outcomes, but I thought there, needed to be some light shined on, people who had bootstrap companies to just a few million in revenue and sold for just a few million. And I think that's just an awesome path. I think going after, the bigger prize, raising venture capital and stuff, like Acquire.com is venture funded. So, I've been a part of both paths, and I thought, the path that people just don't talk about very much is companies that are self-funded and are growing very efficiently with capital, and then when the business is sold by the owner, they own the majority of the business, so their outcome can be so much more meaningful. And so I kind of have that as kind of my founding story, if you will, because I bootstrapped my previous company. We'd raise a little bit of money, but never, large venture rounds or anything like that. And so the idea was just, hey, I think it'd be really awesome if, I can help others have the same outcome that I had. Because when I went through my acquisition, I remember like Googling stuff like, what is due diligence? What is, this? And then eventually we got a big law firm that helped. But I didn't even know about private equity. I didn't know what, like, I kind of got it. I was like, okay, you buy stuff and then what do you do? Like, no. So, and then when I sold, there was just even more, you know, uh, data points around just how uninformed the market was. Like, I'll never forget it, but a lot of my friends with other startups would ask me, how'd you find the buyer? How'd you agree on valuation? Again, how did you find the buyer? Like that was kind of the biggest question, is how do you actually find a buyer? So I think just kind of telling, the story, my personal story where you get founder market fit was really important. And then also just making it fun. Like these are principles that I really believe. And this also comes from Christian Friedland. So Christian Friedland bootstrapped his company too. He didn't raise any money ever, and he sold it for a very life changing amount, in my opinion. And so I did the same, not nearly as as large as him, but enough to where I'm financially comfortable, not flying private or anything like that. But that was the thought process was there's this underserved market of, let's call it the long tail of startups. And so I really wanted to bring a message to them like, hey, you guys are awesome too. I know TechCrunch and Inc. magazine and Forbes, they only talk about the venture funded ones, but let's shine some light on these companies because these are really great acquisition opportunities. You're playing startup on the hardest mode possible. Um, so that was kind of the initial thought process, and then just me being And then I've done some other funny things. I'm sure you've seen like with the Russ Hanneman Silicon Valley videos.
So fun. I love those.
And I just thought he's my favorite character. So I'm on Cameo. So a lot of the marketing is very just I think the best type of marketing is where you're educating your audience, but also entertaining them. So you're not taking yourself too seriously. You're not really trying too hard with a meticulous strategy. You're trying to create the playbook, not follow the playbook. And so when I market, I'm always testing stuff. I'm always, I'll go from memes to videos to different, tweets in a day. Like, cause I'm always just kind of curious, like what's working now? Because what worked last year, it won't work this year. And so you always want to be. I've always viewed marketing as your goal should be to market in a way that, or let me put it this way. Every company has 3 or 4 companies that kind of do what you do, and for me, it's business brokers, it's Flippa, Biz Buy Sell, whoever. But what I think, or who I view our real competition is customer attention. So with customer attention, you have 2 things you can do. You can earn it or you can buy it. And earning it is a lot more valuable. So that's why a big part of our marketing strategy has been storytelling, sharing our brand, celebrating acquisitions, educating the market, trying to write the book on acquisitions. So always a work in progress, but also, keeping it fun and making people laugh once in a while.
Yeah, when was in San Francisco as a 20-year-old, I got sucked into the tech scene and doing a startup because everybody else was doing it and it was the cool thing to do. And TechCrunch was super big back then, and everybody was sending around TechCrunch links around, hey, like this person just raised $1 million or $3 million. And I love that you're making building a small business in a bootstrap way cool again, because I know that the bigger your megaphone gets, kind of the bigger your audience gets, the more people you're going to attract into this. And they're going to realize, oh, yeah, actually, like tech startups are really hard. And most people don't make any money doing a tech startup. Like 90% are just going to kind of work for many years, wash out, and go look for something else to do. Um, I know that as an ex tech founder myself, and have a lot of friends that went through that process as well. But building a small business that sells a real product that people need is much easier. It's much easier to discover and to build like meaningful wealth. So I think it's really cool that you're out there beating the drum, sharing that message, because I think it's something the world needs.
Appreciate that. And maybe a tip for listeners too, if you want to expand on that sort of thought process, there's a really good book called Strategic Entrepreneurism or something like that. So John Fisher, he has basically, how most people build startups, and then he has a framework around how you should build startups. The general premise is don't raise a lot of money, map out who your strategic buyers, your potential buyers could be from day one, and then basically build a piece of software or a software company almost as a puzzle piece that'll fit into a larger company. And the author has sold, I believe, 6, 7, 8 different technology businesses. It's a short read too, and it's one of my favorite books. I've read it 10 times.
Awesome. I see it here. I'm going to
And I've
check it
only
out.
read it 10 times because it's such a short.
It's a tough name. Strategic
Yeah, it's great.
Entrepreneurism, Shattering the Startup Entrepreneurial Myths.
Yeah, that one. No one's heard of it. It's a gem. Definitely check that one out.
Awesome. I'll check it out. Hey, I want to flip to family for a little bit, or raising your kids, because I listened to some of your previous podcast interviews, and you talked a little bit about how your entrepreneurial drive came from scarcity and just, it sounded like growing up with not a lot, frankly. And, you've now had some success and you've sold a company, you have another successful company here. So I'm sure your kids are living a very different existence than you ever did. And I'm curious, how do you like think about bridging the gap between, or maybe like creating artificial scarcity, or how do you create a hunger in them, or does that none of that really matter and they're just going to live a totally different existence than you? What do you think about all that?
Oh man, these are very top of mind questions. So I'll give you some parallels. I got my passport when I was 23. My son got his passport when he was 2. Like, what? And I never went to Hawaii until I grew up in San Clemente. So spring break, everyone would go to Hawaii, but my family could never afford it. My son's been to Hawaii twice and he's not even 4. And so I do bring it up to my wife, like, hey, like I didn't do this stuff when I had never been on a yacht. I had never been in a Ferrari. Like I had never, um, been to Tahoe to a nice vacation house. Like how do we build a little bit of grit and hunger into this kid? um so the best I'm doing is applying a few principles into him really early on, which is really letting him fall and get up on his own. So when I see him fall, I don't rush to pick him up. I say, if you ask him, what do we do when we fall down, he says, get up. I'm like, that's right. And then I instill into him, what do we do when we want to get better? And he responds back, we give it our best and we try. I'm like, that's right. What's the other one? Kind of. So one thing we don't do is we don't buy him anything. Like if we go to the Lego store, we never buy him anything. We always mention like you have to have money to buy that. You want to know how you get money? You build a business. Want to know a business you could make yourself? A lemonade stand. And so we got this lemonade stand coming up. But yeah, I mean, I'm still figuring it out. If I'm being honest, I just have one kid. His name is Julian. He's going to turn 4 October 29th. So hoping he doesn't grow up. Um, but in one vein, I think what's really beautiful about everything is I married into a really really beautiful Italian family, and there's just so much love that I never had when I was a kid. Like we were just at grandma and grandpa's house yesterday for no reason, having fun, going outside, riding his bike. I'm on my skateboard. So I think he's surrounded by so much love and has so much support and so many people caring for him. He's gonna do great, and he does kind of have a lot of my personality traits, which I can already see. He loves Legos. He loves building stuff. He's already like kind of asking how to play chess. I used to play chess a lot when I was a kid. So we'll see. I don't know if you have a good answer to that question, but that's definitely like a book I'm going to be like trying to pick up soon. Is how do you instill kind of work hard because nothing is given to you in life. Life's kind of like, I there's something I always tell my wife, which is life in my view is kind of like when you're surfing. You can get on a really good wave, and when you're on that wave, enjoy it, because once it ends you can get off, and then you got a huge wave coming at you and you have nowhere to go, and that wave just crashes on you. And so when you have this mindset of enjoy things when it's really good, but also have the understanding that 5 seconds later, something really bad can happen. So be ready for it. At least that's just kind of how my mind thinks sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I don't have the perfect answer. I'm not the person on Twitter giving parenting advice because I don't have it, but that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, when you get it, we want to hear it. Because for now, it sounds like you're teaching him to be strong or resilient to get back up when he falls down, self dependent on himself, I guess. You're teaching him the value of money and maybe building things.
Yeah, exactly. Things that I wish I knew early is because I had to figure out all that stuff on my own in terms of how is wealth created? What's a job? Because my mom cleaned houses. They never had office jobs. So yeah, lots of sort of like, I'm also learning as he's learning. But one thing I will say is, having a kid changes you for the better.
Has it affected your work or how you think about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things I don't do anymore because, like, it's 3 o'clock now. I got to pick him up at 5, so I'll be picking it up then. I always make an effort to at least drive him to school, pick him up from school. I tuck him in every night, so I'm the closer. That's what I tell my mom, or not my mom. Well, my wife, his mom. Uh, so just making time, but just understanding like these years you can never. And I think it took me a little bit to kind of like really understand it. But they just start growing so fast, and you're like, I want like you're my like little buddy. Like I want to hang out with you as much as I possibly can. So, you know, and the reality is like, you got to pick, certain things because there's so much to be done at a startup as you're building it, but there's nothing that's going to take away, this time that I can never get back with my son. So I just prioritize my calendar. You can't book me in the morning. You can't book me later in the evening. So I have just more guardrails, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say like having a kid does make you more disciplined and more focused with your time, I completely agree with that statement because you have to be. If you aren't, then you're just kind of an absentee dad, and that creates a whole nother set of issues.
We just recently bought a business called Scribe, and for the audience, it's a self-publishing company basically. So if you want to publish a book, you want to get your ideas out there, you're an executive or a coach or a lawyer, a real estate agent, entrepreneur, you can use this company to write a book for you, edit it, publish it, get it looking beautiful, and get it out into the world. And when I first heard about this company, I reached out to you because I don't know how it is, but I think I saw their customer list and your name popped up. And so I reached out and I said, "Hey, I see you were a customer. Like, tell me a little bit about it. Should I run away from this company? Should I run towards it? Tell me a little bit about like what got you to write a book."
Candidly, it was so with my first business, I had a journal that I kept where I would just update it every month and I'd just write, how are things going? Where can we improve? What's like, a big problem we have and 5 things I'm grateful for. And I have a catalog over 8 years so I can read back and go like feel like, oh, I really feel that moment when I was going through it. And so I took that and just turned it into a book. And I also recommend doing that just because any problem that you write down and the next time you look at it, every time I always go, oh, that problem? I've completely forgot about that problem. That felt like the worst thing in the world. Now I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
Now I got a new problem though. Let me write that down. So it gives you some perspective. But yeah, so I used Scribe Media to write a book. Process was awesome. I'm not the best writer, so the editing was great. The design of the book, and then I think the trickiest part is the distribution of the book. So getting it on Amazon. And the book is called Getting Acquired for people listening. I haven't made a cent off the book. I just wrote it to just hopefully inspire one or two or three entrepreneurs. And it's just my honest story of me in my 20s building a SaaS startup to an exit, not knowing everything, not literally knowing nothing about what I was doing. And so all the mistakes, all the stuff that went wrong. So it's more of a book of my story essentially. But yeah, just getting on like Amazon and getting like a audiobook made. I had someone record over and read the whole book and, record that soundtrack, and it's still up. So the service, yeah, when you told me that you were gonna, because I saw they went out of business, and then you reached out and said, should I buy it? I immediately was like, hell yeah. Like, I think writing a book is one of those things where you can write 1,000 blog posts, you can write a number of different, tweets or whatever it may be. But when you write a book, it's kind of like this one piece of content that people really get to know you from. And it allows people to like really dive in and get to know you on a particular topic deeper than anything I've had people reach out to me saying like, hey, this book like really, changed my perspective on startups, or just thanks so much for your just candid view on your experience building startups. Like you build an emotional connection so much deeper than any other medium, from a podcast to social media. Really gets people to know you, and then also agree or disagree with your point of view of whatever topic you're writing about. So glad you bought it. I as soon as you texted me, I was like, it's a good buy. I don't know what the price or the details are, but I had a phenomenal experience. I'm not trying to just give you a customer testimonial right now. It was, I found out about them in 2016, and when they were called Book in a Box, I believe. And I said, I'm going to take all these journal entries when I'm done with business apps. I'm going to turn it all into a book. And then, COVID came and had a ton of time on my hands. And so got that done.
Have you found that it helped your current business at all? Because you wrote a book about acquisitions. You have a company now all about acquisitions. Is there any correlation, or are those two kind of separated?
I would say so. I would, in terms of, again, when I started the business, I wrote down storytelling. So I figured, let's really tell a book on like what is the entrepreneurial journey really truly look like. And my book even goes from like when I got the idea, what I do, who'd I tell, and the bumps during the journey, like the ups and the downs and everything. And then having it tie into acquisitions, I think definitely gives some authority. So absolutely. I think, it's a great piece of content for people to understand that, you know, I've been in your shoes. Like I know what outcome you're trying to achieve. And I also know how hard it is and how unlikely it is, but you can do it. I did. If a moron like me can do it, maybe you can too. So I would say the ROI or value is immense. In terms of how to measure it, I can only really speak to just the amount of people that have, you know, written to me or just said, "Hey, I read your book." And I think that's so cool because when someone reads your book, like they really know you. It's really hard to get to know someone through one podcast or, a newsletter that I had, like I was saying previously, or if just going through my Twitter timeline, you'll get some, I'm just saying random thoughts in the morning when I'm drinking coffee. So I think it's just such a great way to really consolidate who you are and kind of your perspective on the world. And then if it positively impacts even just one person, I think it's, completely worth it. But yeah, it's gotten a ton of compliments in terms of, helping build that brand authority for Acquire.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. I'm just going to clip that whole thing and put it on the homepage of our website. That's going to be helpful. I'm glad you
feel free,
pressed me
man.
into it. It definitely was a little bit
You
of
saved my
a,
book. So
yeah, it was a little bit of a messier situation than I'm used to, but on the other side, there's a great brand. We have an incredible CEO that I'm really excited about, who's also a scribe author, and thousands of happy authors like yourself. So thank you for giving me the push. I appreciate it.
yeah, well, if you ever need help, let me know because I want to make sure that my book continues to live on. So I'm in your corner on this one.
I appreciate it, man. Well, great. This was awesome. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure a lot of folks are going to get use from this. So it was good hanging out today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sieva. Appreciate it.